The notification came on a Tuesday. Not a call, not a knock on the door. Just a message from Dana, my closest friend at the company, the one who knows everything about everyone. And the message said only, "Did you know Helena is back in the city?" I stared at my phone for a long time. Long enough that the screen went dark. I didn't unlock it right away. I just sat there, in my car, in the parking garage of the gym I'd been going to for 2 years. The gym I'd chosen specifically because it was far from downtown, far from the office, far from every single person who knew my name and my title, and the version of me I'd built so carefully since she left. My hands were on the steering wheel. I wasn't going anywhere. I don't know exactly how long I sat there. Long enough that the fluorescent light above my car started flickering, which it always did, and I never minded before. But right then, it felt like the whole world was blinking at me, asking me something I didn't know how to answer. Helena is back. Those 3 words rearranged the inside of my chest in a way that nothing had in 18 months. I should have been fine. I told myself I was fine. I'd been telling myself that for 1.5 years, in therapy, in long runs at this exact gym, in all the journal entries I started and never finished because putting it into words made it too real. I put my phone in my bag. I grabbed my gym bag off the passenger seat. I told myself what I always told myself. 1 hour, just train. You're fine. I pushed through the entrance doors, and there she was, standing at the front desk in a gray sports set I'd never seen before, signing her name on a new member form. She turned before I had a chance to look away, and she smiled. Not a polite smile, not a surprised smile. A smile that said, "I see you." And I stood there like someone had pressed pause on my entire nervous system, thinking only one thing. How long has she known I trained here? Let me go back, because none of what happened at that front desk makes sense without what came before it. Helena Vasquez became my CEO 26 months ago. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. I was already 3 years into the company when the board brought her in. There was a lot of talk before she arrived. She was known, respected, the kind of woman who walked into rooms and made people recalibrate. I'd read her interview in a trade publication once and thought, sharp, precise, controlled. Good for the company. I was the VP of operations. Our roles intersected constantly. My first impression of her in person was that she was exactly who she appeared to be on paper. Efficient, focused, never unkind, but never warm either. She ran meetings like someone who had decided years ago that time was the one resource she would never waste. We were professional, mutual respect, nothing more. I didn't think about her outside of work. That's the honest truth of the early part. I want to be fair to my own timeline here, because it's easy to look back and rewrite the beginning to make it more cinematic than it was. It wasn't cinematic. It was 2 competent women doing their jobs well and occasionally disagreeing on budget allocation. The shift happened so slowly that I didn't notice it happening. It started with a project, a restructuring of our West Coast logistics chain that required her to be more involved in my department than usual. We started having weekly check-ins that turned into twice weekly. Those meetings started running over by 10, then 15 minutes. Not because of inefficiency, but because we kept finding more to say. She asked questions differently than other executives. She didn't ask to evaluate. She asked because she was genuinely curious about how I thought. No one in a C-suite had ever made me feel like my thinking process mattered, not just my conclusions. I noticed I was preparing for our meetings differently, more carefully. I caught myself thinking about what she would push back on, and then thinking about her specifically. Her expression when she found something interesting, the way she tilted her head when she disagreed but hadn't decided to say so yet. I told myself it was professional investment. She was my CEO. Of course I thought about her. There was a work dinner one evening, end of quarter, the whole leadership team at a restaurant in Midtown. She sat across from me, not by design, just how the table filled. We talked about the logistics project for maybe 10 minutes, and then somehow ended up in a conversation about the first jobs we'd ever had before any of this. The embarrassing ones. The ones that taught us something we'd never expected. She laughed, telling a story about a summer she spent working at a plant nursery when she was 19. Not a professional laugh. A real one. Head back, eyes crinkled at the corners, one hand flat on the table. I remember thinking, I want to make her laugh like that again. I filed that thought somewhere I didn't revisit for a while. Months passed. The project concluded. Our meetings scaled back to normal frequency. But something had changed in the texture of our interactions. A warmth that hadn't been there before. Something I couldn't quite describe, except to say that when she walked into a room where I already was, I became more aware of the room. Then she started disappearing. Not all at once. Gradually. Fewer responses to emails. Meetings rescheduled and then rescheduled again. When she was present, she was present. But there was a new distance, a careful professionalism that felt constructed rather than natural. I didn't know what I'd done. I replayed everything, looking for the mistake. And then, 14 months into her tenure, the board announced she was stepping down. A mutual departure, the press release said. She had a new opportunity. She wished the company continued success. I found out with everyone else. Through an email. I didn't see her again before she was gone. I told myself that was fine, that it was the appropriate distance between a CEO and a VP, that whatever warmth I'd imagined between us was professional, contextual, and over. I told myself that for 18 months. And then my phone buzzed in a parking garage and the screen said, "Helena is back in the city. I should tell you something I didn't fully understand until much later. I didn't grieve her leaving like you grieve losing a colleague. I grieved it the way you grieve something that was almost a thing. A sentence that got stopped mid-word. A door that closed before you understood what was on the other side. That's not a feeling I'd had before. Not like that. I'd had relationships. Real ones. One that lasted 4 years, with someone who was good and steady and kind. And when it ended, we were both a little relieved, which told us everything we needed to know about what it had been. I told myself for years that the absence of fireworks was maturity, that choosing someone safe was the smart version of love. Standing in that gym lobby, looking at Helena's face, I understood for the first time that I'd been wrong. Not about her. Not yet. I mean about myself. About what I'd been feeling for the past 1.5 years. In all those small ways I'd been chalking up to stress and professional loss and just needing more sleep. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me stay in the lobby. She said, "I had no idea you trained here." Her voice was the same. That was the thing that got me first. Not her face. Not the sports set. Not the fact that she was standing 5 feet from me in the gym I'd chosen specifically to be nowhere near my professional life. Her voice was the same. That particular tone. Low, deliberate, with just enough warmth in it that you could never quite tell if she was being careful or just being herself. I said something. I don't remember exactly what. Something functional. Something that did not reflect the inside of my body at that moment, which felt like a controlled demolition in very slow motion. She finished signing in. She picked up her bag. She said she was in the middle of setting up her new apartment. She'd just moved back last week, and she'd needed a gym close to the new place. "I looked at 3 before this one," she said. I nodded like that was a normal piece of information. She said, "It's good to see you, Mara." And she walked toward the locker rooms. I stood at the front desk for a beat too long. The girl at the reception desk asked if I needed anything. I said no, I was fine, and I went to the weight floor, where I proceeded to do the least focused workout of my entire athletic life. I kept replaying the smile. Not because it was unusual, because it was familiar. The specific version of that smile, the one with the slight asymmetry on the left side, the one that suggested she was thinking something she hadn't decided to say. I had not seen that smile in 18 months, and I realized, with a feeling like cold water, that I had missed it. Specifically, not in the abstract way you miss a good working relationship, in the way that you miss a specific warmth that you didn't know you'd been cataloging until it's gone and then suddenly present again. I left the gym early. I sat in my car again. Same spot. I called Dana. "Did she tell you she was joining my gym?" I asked. "She didn't tell me anything," Dana said. "I just heard she was back in the city. How do you know what gym she joined?" I opened my mouth and then didn't say anything for a second. "Mara?" Dana said. "It's fine," I said. "Never mind." That was the first lie I told about Helena. There would be more. I drove home. I made dinner. I watched something on television that I couldn't have described 20 minutes after it ended. I went to bed at a reasonable hour and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling, thinking about an asymmetrical smile and the fact that she'd looked at 3 gyms before choosing this one. 3 gyms. I told myself it was a coincidence. I almost believed it. The following Monday, she was there again. Same time, which was my usual time, the time I'd been coming for 2 years. She was on the treadmill when I arrived, earphones in, eyes forward. She didn't see me come in. I watched her for 3 seconds longer than I should have. Then I went to the free weights and did not look over again. For the first 2 weeks, we operated like that. Present in the same space, acknowledging each other with nods or brief hellos, maintaining the careful distance of 2 professionals who used to work together and have now encountered each other in a context that requires a small social renegotiation. It was fine. Contained. Then one morning she appeared at the end of my row while I was finishing a set, towel over her shoulder, water bottle in hand, and she said, "Do you want to grab coffee after? There's a place on the corner. I've been meaning to try it." The question was casual. Her expression was neutral. I said yes before I finished thinking about it. And that was when things started to change. Not out there, between us, but in the place inside me that I'd been keeping very, very quiet. The coffee shop was small, warm, slightly too loud. We sat across from each other and talked for an hour and 20 minutes, and I know it was exactly that long because I had a call at noon that I nearly missed. We talked about the company, not in a loaded way, just the way you talk about a place you both know. We talked about her new role, which was a board advisory position at a firm she'd been consulting for during the 18 months she was away. We talked about the city, about the neighborhood where she'd found her apartment, about a film we'd both apparently seen in the same week without knowing it. At no point did she reference the way things ended at the company, the distance, the sudden professionalism that had replaced warmth, the email about her departure that said nothing personal. I wanted to ask. Several times I felt the question rise up in my throat, and then I put it back down. I drove to my noon call thinking about the way she'd held her coffee cup, both hands, like something to be protected from the cold, even though the shop was warm. I drove to my noon call thinking, I am in trouble. Here is what I didn't say in that coffee shop, or in the one after that, or in the 3 weeks of gym mornings that followed. I didn't say, when you left, I couldn't figure out how to make the office feel normal again. I rearranged my whole daily rhythm and told myself it was a productivity upgrade, when really, I was trying to avoid the floor where your office used to be. I didn't say, I kept one email, just one. From the logistics project, where you wrote 3 paragraphs at midnight responding to a proposal I'd sent. And the last line said, "This is exactly the right instinct, Mara. Trust it." I don't know why I kept it. I do know why I kept it. I didn't say, I chose this gym because I needed somewhere that had nothing to do with the professional world I'd built, and it became the one place where I felt like just myself. And now you're here. And I don't know if I'm upset or relieved or both. I didn't say any of those things. What I did instead was show up. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, my regular days. I showed up, and we moved through the comfortable rhythm that was becoming our thing, without either of us naming it. A workout in parallel, a nod across the floor, and then coffee on the corner, if neither of us had somewhere to be. Twice she had somewhere to be and said so directly. I appreciated the directness. It was very her. The other mornings, we went to the coffee shop. I started to know things. The small, intimate kind of things you only learn when you're paying attention, without acknowledging that you're paying attention. She didn't check her phone during conversations unless it was clearly urgent. She added a lot of sugar to her coffee and was mildly embarrassed about it. She had a habit of pressing her thumbnail against her index finger when she was thinking hard about something. She didn't perform agreement. If she didn't have a strong opinion, she said so. And if she did, she said that too, calmly, without needing to win. I started to catch myself thinking about her at odd hours, driving to a meeting, cooking dinner. Once, at 2 a.m, lying awake for no reason I could name, I found myself reconstructing the last conversation we'd had. Not reviewing it, just replaying it. Her voice. The way she said my name. I got up and drank a glass of water and stood at my kitchen window for a while. I was trying not to know what I knew. Because naming it meant the next question was what to do about it, and I didn't have an answer to that question that didn't terrify me in one direction or another. There was also this. She'd left before. Without a word, without explanation, with a warmth that turned careful, and then turned into an email to the whole company. I had no idea why. I had spent 18 months not asking myself if it had something to do with me, because that question lived too close to another question I wasn't ready to ask. Dana noticed. Of course Dana noticed. "You seem different lately," she said, over lunch one Thursday. "Different how?" She looked at me the way she sometimes does, head tilted, eyes doing that thing where she's already 2 steps ahead of the conversation. "Lighter," she said. "But also like you're carrying something. Both at the same time. It's a specific look." "I'm fine," I said. "You've said 'I'm fine' to me about 4 times in the last month," she said. "Which is 4 times more than you usually say it. You usually just are fine." I looked at my plate. "Is this about Helena?" she asked, quietly. Not prying, just Dana, who has always been able to put her finger on the thing I'm trying to avoid. "We run into each other at the gym," I said. "We've had coffee a few times. It's not a thing." "I didn't say it was a thing." "Then why are you asking?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because the way you're defending something I didn't accuse you of is usually a sign that you're accusing yourself of it." I didn't say anything. She didn't push. That's one of the things I love most about Dana. She doesn't push. She makes room, and then she waits. I changed the subject. She let me. But the conversation stayed with me. The part about accusing myself. The specific phrasing of it. Because she was right, in the way she often is about the things I don't want to examine directly. I was defending myself against a charge I hadn't been given, which meant I already knew what the charge was. A week later, there was a morning at the gym, a Thursday not my usual day I'd come in because I'd missed Wednesday, when Helena was there unexpectedly. She looked surprised to see me, and then not surprised, and then she smiled. "Thursday," she said. "Missed yesterday," I said. She nodded. She was wearing a blue shirt I hadn't seen before. Her hair was tied back differently than usual. I noticed both of these things in approximately 1 second, and then had to look at the equipment on the wall for a moment, so that my face would do something reasonable. We worked out. We went to the coffee shop. She was quieter that morning. I noticed, but didn't remark on it. About 40 minutes in, holding her cup in both hands, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. She looked at me for a moment, with an expression I couldn't quite decode. "When I left the company," she said, "were you angry?" The question came out of nowhere, and exactly from where it had always been waiting. I took a breath. "I didn't know how to feel," I said. which was true but not the whole truth. She nodded slowly. She looked at her coffee. She said, "I should have said something before I went, directly, not just the company-wide email." A pause. "I'm sorry about that." I didn't know what to say to that. I mean, I had things to say, a considerable number of things, but I couldn't sort them fast enough to turn them into sentences. "Why did you go?" I asked. She looked up at me. "Because I needed to," she said. She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask her to, but the way she said it, the weight of it, the thing underneath it that she wasn't expanding on, sat between us for the rest of the coffee, and I turned it over for days afterward. Because I needed to. Needed to. Not wanted to. Not chose to. Needed. I lay awake that night, and I allowed myself, for the first time, to ask the question I'd been refusing to ask for 18 months. What if she left because of me? Not because of anything I'd done wrong, but because of something she felt. Something between us. Something she'd recognized and decided she couldn't stay inside of. What if I hadn't been imagining it? I pressed my face into my pillow and breathed for a long time. The question didn't go away in the morning. The next Monday at the gym, I watched her across the floor, not obviously, just in the peripheral way that becomes second nature when someone occupies too much of your internal landscape. And I felt with absolute clarity something I had been trying not to feel for months. I was in love with her. Not infatuated. Not fascinated. Not professionally admiring. In love. The specific kind that lives in the body as well as the mind. The kind that rearranges what okay means. I finished my workout. I packed my bag. She looked over from the treadmill. She raised one hand, a small wave, the kind that says "see you Thursday" or "see you in the coffee shop" or just "I see you." I don't know which one she meant. I raised my hand back. I walked out. I sat in my car for the third time, and this time I didn't try to talk myself out of anything. I just sat with the knowledge, let it take up the space it had been claiming for months. And then I took out my phone and stared at her name in my contacts for a long, long time. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it means this story reached something in you. That feeling of knowing something about yourself before you're ready to say it out loud. I think a lot of us know exactly how that feels. So hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and ring the notification bell so YouTube can tell you when the next story drops. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever known exactly how you felt about someone but spent a long time pretending you didn't? Because admitting it would change everything? How long did you carry that before you let yourself stop? Type it for me. I read every single one. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'll leave a heart. Now, back to the story. I made a decision the night after the Monday when I finally stopped arguing with myself. I was not going to say anything. I know how that sounds, but I want to explain the logic of it, because it wasn't cowardice, or not only cowardice. It was something more complicated than that. I had a life that worked, a career I'd built with both hands over a decade, a city I'd claimed, slowly, as mine. A version of myself that was functional and respected and, most of the time, genuinely at peace. Helena had left once without explanation. And whatever the reason was, and I now had a theory about the reason, she'd chosen to leave rather than stay. She'd made a choice. People's choices deserve to be respected, even when they hurt. And there was something else. Something I hadn't examined fully. The question of who I was, in this, not in relation to her, but in relation to myself. What I was calling love, or recognizing as love, was also part of a larger territory I hadn't mapped yet. And I was 37 years old, and that territory felt large and uncertain, and mine to move through at my own pace. So, I would keep going to the gym. I would keep having coffee with her when it was natural. I would be her friend, a real one, not a performed one. And I would keep what I felt to myself. That lasted 11 days. On the 11th day, a Sunday, she texted to ask if I'd eaten at a particular Thai restaurant near the gym, because she was trying to decide about dinner. I told her I had, and it was good, especially the curry. She sent back a thumbs up. 20 minutes later, she sent, "Actually, do you want to come?" I stared at the message. Then I said yes. We ate dinner at a small table by the window and talked for 2.5 hours about nothing in particular. The kind of conversation that doesn't have a subject so much as a temperature. Warm throughout, with no moment where either of us wanted it to end. She told me about her mother, who lived in Arizona and called every Sunday and always asked the same 3 questions in the same order. I told her about my sister, who was expecting her second child and had started sending me unsolicited parenting content at unpredictable hours. She laughed at the parenting content detail. That laugh again. Walking out, it had started to rain. The kind of light rain that's almost not rain, almost just the air being wet. We stood under the awning of the restaurant, and she looked out at the street and said, "I'm really glad I came back to the city." I looked at her profile, the light from the restaurant window, the rain. "I'm glad you did too," I said. She turned and looked at me, just for a moment, and something in her expression shifted, very slightly, the way a familiar piece of music shifts when it moves into a different key. The same notes, rearranged into something that means something else. I didn't look away. Neither did she. We stood like that for a second that lasted considerably longer than a second. Then a cab went through a puddle on the street and splashed water onto the curb, and we both stepped back slightly. And the moment broke, and she smiled. Not the asymmetric smile this time, but a different one, softer, a little uncertain, and said she'd see me at the gym. I walked home. It was raining properly now. I let it rain on me for about a block before I thought to open my umbrella. My hands were very slightly shaking, not from cold. I called Dana that night. I stood at my kitchen window, phone pressed to my ear, and when she picked up, I said, "I have to tell you something." "Okay," she said. And I told her. Not everything. Not the months of cataloging and reconstructing conversations and lying awake at 2 a.m. Just the essential thing. The truest version of it. What I felt. What I thought she might feel. What I didn't know how to do about any of it. Dana listened without interrupting, which for Dana is the highest form of respect. When I finished, she said, "Have you thought about the possibility that she already knows?" I stood very still. "She chose your gym, Mara," she said, "out of 3. I didn't say anything. "I'm not telling you what to do," Dana said. "I'm just pointing out that some things that look like coincidence are people who have already made a decision, but are waiting to see if you'll make yours first." I thought about this for a long time after I hung up. The following Wednesday, I'd gone in early, before my usual time, because I had a full day ahead. She was already there when I arrived. She was finishing a cool-down stretch, and she saw me come in, and she said, "Early today." "Big day," I said. She looked at me, something considered in her expression. "Good luck," she said. Simple, direct. Just 2 words. I don't know why those 2 words affected me the way they did. Maybe because she said them like she meant them for more than the meeting. Like she was saying it about something larger. Like she was saying, "Whatever you're about to walk toward, I'm wishing you the courage for it." I thought about Dana's words on the drive home that night. About decisions that look like coincidence. About waiting to see if the other person will move first. 3 days later, on a Saturday, we were in the coffee shop. Not after the gym, just she'd texted and asked, and I'd said yes. And she was telling me something about a book she was reading, and I was listening, or trying to, but I was also watching her. And there was a moment when she paused mid-sentence and looked at me and said, "You're not listening." "I am," I said. "You're doing the thing where you're looking at me, but thinking about something else," she said. I held her gaze. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. The question was quiet, careful, calibrated in a way that felt like an opening, not a trap. I opened my mouth, closed it. She waited. And this is the moment I come back to when I want to understand who I was and who I was becoming. She waited. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't make it easier by looking away or changing the subject. She just waited. Like she trusted me to get there. I felt something move in my chest, something that had been held in one position for a very long time. I said, "I think about you, not just right now, a lot, in general." I paused. "I know that's—" I stopped again. She was very still. "A lot to say," I finished. "I know that." A long moment of silence. She put her coffee cup down, both hands flat on the table now, and then she said very quietly, "I know." We stayed in the coffee shop for another hour after that, not talking about it, not exactly. There was no declaration, no dramatic shift in the physical space between us. We just kept talking, but something in the air had changed its pressure. Like the difference between a room before a window is opened and a room after. She told me why she'd left the company. She said it simply, without ornamentation, the way she said everything that actually mattered to her. She'd recognized what was happening, in herself, between us, and she hadn't known what to do with it inside the structure of what we were professionally. She'd been afraid of the complexity, of the exposure, of asking herself questions she didn't yet have the vocabulary to answer. "I took the easy exit," she said. "I'm not proud of that." "You didn't say goodbye," I said. "I know." She looked at her hands. "I'm sorry. I didn't say it was okay, because it hadn't been entirely okay. I'd spent 18 months in a quiet grief I couldn't quite name. But I also understood it. The shape of the fear she was describing was a shape I recognized from the inside. "I came back to the city for several reasons," she said. "The job was one." She paused. "That was not the only one." I looked at her. "I looked up 3 gyms," she said. "The first one was closer. The second one was nicer." She met my eyes. "The third one was yours." I breathed. Outside, the morning light was doing that thing it does in late autumn in New York when it comes in low and slow through windows and makes everything feel suspended. I said, "I don't entirely know what I'm doing." She said, "That makes 2 of us." "I've never—" I stopped, started again. "This is new territory for me, in ways that are bigger than just you. I want you to know that going in." She nodded. "I know," she said. "I figured. Does that—" I started. "Mara." Her voice was gentle. "I waited 18 months, and then I drove past 3 gyms. I'm not in a hurry." Something loosened in me. Something I hadn't known I was holding that hard. We walked out together. The air was cold and clear, that particular New York cold that feels like honesty. No softness to it, just the real temperature of things. She walked beside me toward the corner where we usually split off in different directions. We stopped at the corner. She looked at me. That specific look, the one I'd been cataloging without permission for over a year. The one with the asymmetry on the left side and the thought underneath it. "Same time Monday?" she said. "Same time Monday," I said. She held my gaze for one more second. Then she turned and walked down her block. I stood at the corner and watched her go. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the full weight of the thing that had just shifted between us. not resolved, not finished, but opened finally into something that could breathe. I turned and walked home in the opposite direction. The city was loud and cold and entirely itself. And I was, for the first time in a very long time, entirely myself inside it. I smiled at nothing in particular. And that was enough. That was, honestly, more than enough. Nothing dramatic happened on Monday. She was there at the usual time. We trained. We went to the coffee shop on the corner. She got her coffee with too much sugar, which she was still mildly embarrassed about, and I didn't say anything, just smiled into my cup. At one point, she was telling a story, and she reached across the table to hand me her phone to show me a photo, and when I passed it back, our hands were in contact for a second longer than necessary, and neither of us said anything about it. We didn't need to. That's the thing I want to leave you with, more than any grand conclusion. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with a declaration. It arrives in the small accumulation of choices. Someone who drives past 2 gyms and stops at your third. Someone who waits when you need time. Someone who says, "I know," before you finish your sentence. And sometimes the most courageous thing you do is not the dramatic act, but the quiet one. Deciding to stop pretending you don't feel what you feel, and walking toward it without knowing exactly how it ends. I still don't know exactly how it ends. But for the first time, not knowing feels like the beginning of something, not the absence of it. If this story stayed with you in some way, write quiet in the comments. That's how I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about the things we almost didn't let ourselves feel, click the video appearing on your screen right now. A big hug to you. Until the next story. If you want to hear uncensored,